Welcome to Impact the World, and my guest today is davidji, who is a world-renowned mindfulness teacher, meditation guide, and a stress expert. davidji has a unique story. He went from a successful career on Wall Street, but one that made him miserable, and after a personal quest, turned that into his current work, which is helping individuals, corporate executives, and sometimes members of the police force with their relationship to stress and meditation. It was a delight to get to speak to him while we're in lockdown via Zoom, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. davidji, thank you so much for being with us for this show. I will share with anybody who's listening to this show or watching this show, my co-producer for the show, Wendy, was super excited to have you on because you've been a hugely influential person in her life, as you have in the lives of many hundreds of thousands at this point. But I know that your role in the world is very different to how you started out. And by your own story, you share that you were originally on Wall Street, but that you were on Wall Street for many years, but quite miserable. So I wonder if before we dive into where you went next, could you just give us a sense of the beginning of your life, your early life, what your focus was, and how you ended up in Wall Street?
Yes, I think it's important to share my misery because I'm not miserable now. So hopefully that gives hope to anyone who's miserable out there. Well, my life right now is really, it's all about serving. It's all about meditating. It's all about teaching people to connect to that innermost aspect of themselves, to have them awaken their own energy, awaken their own vision, really awaken their voice. And how I got here is a very, very circuitous route. And if we look at how we typically get from A to B in life, it's never a straight line. At least I haven't met anyone who has a straight line there. And so I started meditating innocently enough. My first, I guess, introduction to like the kooky world was my mother was really big on Ouija boards. So we would use a Ouija board when I was a kid. So I knew that she always thought that there's something else beyond here, whether it's a kooky realm, whether it's another realm, whether it's many realms, but there's definitely an intelligence beyond this realm. And so that was, embedded in me at a fairly young age. In college, I took an experimental Asian studies course. And part of that was a cool thing where we meditated. And so we had a Zen master, and there were 12 of us in the class. We would all go to this, special room, and we sat in a circle. And we were instructed to raise our hands when we had a thought. In his hands, our Zen master held a keisaku, an 18-inch bamboo stick. And so when we would raise our hands, he would come over and thwack us on the back. And so it definitely changed whatever was going on there. But I was like, I'm not really sure I want to do this thing anymore. So I left that and I got into candle gazing because I really enjoyed the stillness. That was like a really seductive aspect of that process. And I figured, well, maybe it's just not that style. Maybe I could like this thing. So I did candle gazing, and then I got into Tantra, and then I got into mindfulness and Vipassana, and I did a couple of these, silent retreats for 10 days or 2 weeks. Then I got into mantra, and then I really started exploring a lot of other types of meditation and really stuck with that, some of them for years, others for days. And then I started getting involved in the corporate world. And it was originally as a bond trader. And that led me ultimately to become a mergers and acquisitions advisor. And, that's like helping people take over companies and then figuring out how does 1 + 1 equal at least 2.5. And so I did that, and wasn't really enjoying it. I was good at it, but I wasn't really enjoying it. long term, certainly. And I found that as I got deeper and deeper involved in working, 15-hour days, 7 days a week, and suddenly working for other people to help them get rich. Um, and, and I wasn't in that process getting rich. So that was just like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Is it just because of a conditioned thing? And as I got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into someone else's vision, someone else's journey, I got further and further away from my own. And suddenly I realized I had stopped meditating. I had given up my morning meditation ritual for an early morning train ride to the World Trade Center. I'd given up my afternoon and evening ritual for a nice tall glass of scotch. And like that, meditation was gone. And then suddenly I realized, what's also gone? Balance in my life. There was no balance. My relationships were strained at best. I wasn't a great partner. I wasn't really a great husband. I wasn't a great friend. Like, I only had this singular vision to show up, do this thing, go home, pass out. And I would wake up at 2 a.m. with a knot in my stomach, but only every day for like 10 years of that. And I had tried to wash it away, with a late night drink, but like that never worked. And I would just wake up and just be in agony. And I figured, well, this is pretty much, going to be my life. I didn't know there were tools. I didn't really go back to like, oh, well, maybe if you brought a little balance into your life or started meditating again, or, whatever that was. And I didn't really know that there were tools. And so in the wake of 9/11, and I worked on the 82nd floor of Tower 2, and just a few months before 9/11, had the great fortune to get the worst job ever in my life, which took me out of the World Trade Center, working for the worst, most despicable people. And, but, here I am. So, it's a combination of like survivor's remorse and blessings. And who can I thank, every single moment for that? But in the wake of 9/11, I was walking in southern Manhattan past a row of cardboard boxes that people were living in. And I walked past this particular box, and this hand reached out and grabbed my pant leg and pulled me in. And these blue crystalline eyes looked up at me. And this guy said, what's going to be on your tombstone? It's a fairly reflective moment, and never what you expect from that situation. I like reached into my pocket because I figured, oh, I should give this guy, some money or something along those lines. But we like held in that gaze for what seemed like hours, probably just a few seconds. And in that moment, like everything stopped. The world stopped. The traffic stopped. The people stopped. It was just me and him. I call these like butterfly moments where there's something deeper here. Perhaps God speaking through this, magnificent being, that most of the times we don't really even pay attention to these people as we're walking past them. And this was my deep, deep, deep connection. Probably the most profound conversation I ever had with anyone in my life. And we continued to talk just a little bit. And then I staggered away, and suddenly I found myself, tears were streaming down my eyes. My legs were weak. I had to sit down on the steps of an apartment building just about, a few hundred feet away. And I was hyperventilating. I couldn't even catch my breath. And I went home and I shared this with my wife, and she was like, you need to quit your job. And there's this guy, Deepak Chopra. He's doing a meditation retreat in Oxford, England. And maybe you should probably go to that and return to your meditation thing. And I was like, okay, I'm fairly obedient. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And within weeks, I had registered for that. And there's supposed to be like 3,000 people there, but no one was flying right after 9/11. And so there were just like 50, and just like a couple from the United States. Most of them were Europeans. And so suddenly it was like, whoa, meditation, I'm doing it again. And we were meditating for like 6-7 hours a day. I'm practicing yoga and, going deeper into some timeless wisdom. But by the third day, I realized that my heart had been so blackened over these years, and I had been so shut down and so purposeless and so empty inside that each day of meditation was sort of like draping my let's say my heart was this white linen that had been like submerged in black India ink. And every day it was like being draped through a stream, and it was just like washed away and cleansed and lightened. And on the third day, so I felt this emotion that was so unfamiliar to me because I hadn't experienced it in years, maybe 20 years, and it was joy. I was like, oh my God, there's another way to like experience existence. And I was so happy and I was so giddy that I, instantly, spoke to Deepak and I said, what do you think my next step is? And he was like, well, you should probably go to India. And so, of course, I'm fairly obedient. So I didn't even come back home. I went to the embassy in London and got, you know, got my special visa to head off to India and headed off to India in search of the guru. And I searched high and low for the guru. I was looking for that guru, because I was lit in that moment. So receptive. It's like, whatever it is, bring it. And I was like meditating every morning and practicing yoga, twice a day and bathing in the Ganges and praying in the temples and talking to all these people. I searched high and low. I went to Dharamsala to see His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. He was not there that day. Then I traveled, to the south of India, and it was about 5.5 months that I'm like looking for the guru. And as I was laying in a hammock in a cashew forest in Kerala in South India, I'm reading the Bhagavad Gita, this ancient Indian text, and I'm reading. Suddenly, I read this, chapter 2, verse 48, which I have read, I don't know, 200 times before that, because I was reading it every single day. And suddenly I read it, and it starts off with Yoga Sta Kuru Karmani. The protagonist, Arjuna, the great warrior, is talking to God, Krishna, and he's like, how am I supposed to live my life? Just answer me. Just tell me, how am I supposed to walk through the world? And God, as Krishna, in the form of Krishna, replies to him, Yoga Sta Kuru Karmani, which means establish yourself in the present moment and then perform action. And I don't know, that just hit me like a lightning bolt. And I got so excited. I only had a few days left on my visa anyway. And so I raced, racing in India is not the same thing. I waited for 2 days, got a bus that took me another 2 days, and then sat in the airport for another 40 hours. But that was racing back.
No, yeah.
Raced back to New York, and I had the answers. And a friend of mine, after like 3 weeks, said, dude, all you do is sit around and meditate. And I replied, I know. Isn't it amazing? It brings me such joy, and I'm so happy. And he said, well, you're not doing anything else. You're not doing anything else. So why don't you share this with other people? Why don't you teach other people to meditate? And I sarcastically replied to him, come on, I'm from New York. I don't care about anyone else's meditation. And it was true. This was just about me. And he said, well, if you really want to learn something, learn to teach it. Learn it from the inside. Learn the mechanics. Learn the science. Learn all those details. And I was like, okay, how? And he said, come on, reconnect with your boy Deepak. He's got that center in California. He's like, it's the Chopra Center. And so become a meditation teacher. And I was like, again, I'm fairly obedient. Lee, just make a suggestion to me, and clearly I will do it. So I headed off to California to attend this workshop, which would be a component of the teacher training. And at that workshop, it was sort of like a love connection between David Simon, Deepak's partner for 20 years, and me and Deepak. And like in that space on July 14th, Bastille Day, the last day of that workshop, they hired me to run the Chopra Center. And that was like, I never went back home. I never flew. Well, 6 months later, I flew back to get all my stuff. But I just said, like, I'm here. I'm showing up. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for all this time. This is why I've been doing nothing for 2 years. I'm just like allowing this, to settle in. And that began a magnificent journey where I got to apprentice under the two of them for a decade, ultimately becoming the lead educator and then becoming the dean of Chopra Center University, and where I got to certify thousands of people in yoga, Ayurveda, meditation. I got to teach meditation every single day. I got to launch those sunrise meditations with Wendy, and I got to really just immerse and suddenly like listen to people after I would teach them, like, well, why aren't you doing it? And what are your experiences? And what are your challenges? And that allowed me to become a better teacher because at first I was just like telling everyone what to do. And then I realized, well, to be a great teacher, you actually need to listen. So that was one of the blowaway lessons in that process. And at about the 10-year mark, David Simon, it's the cosmic joke. He was my closest and dearest friend, neurologist, dedicated to healing, diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. And when he passed away, I was sort of like, you know what? I think I've really given my all to this process. Let me, really challenging. Let me let this dream go because maybe I've done 85% of it, of what my vision was, what my dream was, and let me start a new dream. And so I left the nest with Deepak's blessing, and which was probably the most difficult, really difficult conversation to have, telling him. And of course, he was like, "You're always part of the family. Don't worry about that. You've done a great job, and how can I help you?" So he's so gracious, so ridiculously gracious. And then I began just doing my own thing, traveling to different countries, working in hospitals, working in South America, into the jungles, working with kids. I've worked in the prisons. I've worked in the corporate world. And so suddenly this thing really took on really a life of its own. And, there's a big difference between teaching people at Bank America and teaching the Dutch Special Forces. So I really got to explore all these other areas and really study the science, study the neurology, study the practical application in a secular way, in a Sanskrit cooked out woo woo way, in a spiritual way, in an emotional way, and I'm hooked. That's what I do now. I meditate probably for at least a few hours every single day, and I get to share these things. And people say, like, "What do you do for a living?" And probably my most common answer is I help people connect to the stillness and silence that rests within, so they can make a better decision. And that's it. And I think that when we can really reconnect to that yoga style Kuru Karmati, connect to that stillness first, and then perform action, we're probably going to show up with a little higher vibration, just a little higher energy to make a better choice. Not always, but there's a higher likelihood.